Holy shit. Breaking news. Danielle Smith is breaking up AHS. She's doing some sweeping changes. Just found this out 10 minutes before scheduled to record this podcast. I had a few other things I wanted to talk about, but now we get to talk about that. And joining me again is Lisa the Normie. Lisa Reed, how are you? Do you mind if I call you the Normie?
Well, I feel bad for anybody else that's a normie that gets attached to me.
Yeah, you're not really that normal, to be honest, but you're the closest thing to a normie I could find to keep me on the level, keep me from going too far into the fringe extreme areas. You got to ground me here, Lisa. But welcome to the show, Lisa. We have a lot to talk about today. I just saw this right before, just as I was preparing the podcast. I saw this news flash come across my feed here saying that Alberta is breaking up AHS, creating new agencies to overhaul healthcare. What have you heard about this? What are your initial impressions?
So I just caught a glimpse of the headline yesterday, and I'm like, I got to come back to that. And of course, I didn't. But my first thought is, what's the public going to think? Like, oh my goodness, now that just opens doors for all kinds of things, like privatized healthcare, and the poor people are just going to suffer so much more because of it. And I can just hear the chatter in my brain about it already.
Yeah, so that's where your mind goes right away, is how this is going to be spun to scare the crap out of the public. Hey,
absolutely.
That's where you went. Yeah, I kind of went there too, but well, that was my second thought. My first thought is, yes, screw AHS. I hate AHS. AHS has been the bane of my existence, been the bane of my family's existence. We're a family of healthcare workers. We got 3 paramedics, a nurse in my immediate family. And, they haven't been kind to the Moen family. And the last two or 3 years have been their unkindness on steroids. They made life miserable for healthcare workers. It's no coincidence that healthcare workers are streaming out of AHS and leaving for other jobs in private industry, wherever they can get work, or just deciding to take an early retirement or switch careers altogether. It's just been a nightmare the last 2 years being a healthcare worker, working under the bureaucracy of a system that now had a license to put its thumb on us, just to jackboot all healthcare workers, and changing rules every week. It was never so obvious that we were objects of compliance and not clinical practitioners in the eyes of our bosses than it has been in the past 2 years. And so people have been leaving. Now Danielle Smith has a big, had it on her agenda to change us. And we often hear lip service from politicians and nothing ever gets done. I mean, Justin Trudeau promised all these electoral reforms and huge sweeping changes. Nothing ever happened. They like to talk a good game, these politicians, but Danielle Smith is actually backing up and changing it. Now, is it what I would like to see? No, I mean, I would like to see the legalization of healthcare. I'd like to be able to provide my services to consenting adults without, having the government interfere and get involved and block me from doing that. But of course, that's not possible. In Canada, we have very little private healthcare, and what little there is has to jump through a lot of red tape and has to report to governmental agencies like AHS. And so it basically dramatically limits what you can do as a healthcare provider. So healthcare is basically illegal. I'd have preferred to see some legalization of healthcare. But Danielle Smith, it seems like she's creating something in that direction, right? It looks like a decentralization of healthcare. So AHS isn't going away. It's going to stick to acute care It's going to get out of continuing care. It's going to get out of primary care. You know, I was reading an article by David Clemenga. I think he's a very leftist, socialist, climate activist. You know, any bad ideas that the left has, you can guarantee that David Clemenga has them as well. He wrote an article. I'm always curious to see what the enemy is going to say about this. And his big complaint about this is it's going to create layers and layers of bureaucracy, more bureaucracy, and cost billions to do. And you know, he's not totally wrong. I mean, in one sense, it is going to create more bureaucracy. Like if you have, let's say, one giant corporation, and that breaks up into 100 different small corporations, mom and shop businesses, well, you're going to have a manager for each one of those little corporations, right? So in a sense, you're going to have more managers and you're going to have more bureaucracy by dint of having more businesses. But
is it possible for them to have more managers? Like, I remember it would have been in 2017 when Tanny Yao printed off the AHS org chart throughout the federal building, and it covered like the walls from floor to ceiling, and there were managers for managers. Like, it was ridiculous. Yeah. Managers were managing less than 11 people at a time. So how many more managers can we get?
Well, I don't know. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, you know, this isn't the issue to me isn't how many managers per se. It's how are they serving the constituents, right? How are they actually doing something useful? And you know, part of the problem when you have a giant one size fits all centralized organization like AHS is that it's very the tendency is to add more and more managers, more and more policies to standardize things, to homogenize things, to try to control the chaos and the unknowable. And of course, it's a never-ending thing, because every time you implement the policy that tries to dump things down to the lowest common denominator, it creates a whole bunch of unintended consequences that they never thought about. And so they have to add more policy. It's just like a never-ending quagmire of adding more and more policies, and you might need more and more managers to manage that. Well, you know, now we're decentralizing, and so we're trying to get things closer to the customers, right? And so what that might look like, ideally, in my world of EMS, is decentralizing down to, say, the municipal level, so that a municipality controls EMS, because they're the one. We live in the communities, we serve those communities, we respond to calls in those communities. And you know, Sherwood Park might be different than downtown Calgary, which might be different than Okotoks, which might be different than Grand Prairie. They're different demographics, there's different industries, there's different healthcare needs. And so one size fits all doesn't really work. You know, so you would prefer to get, and you know, that might mean more, well, instead of one boss of EMS, now you have 5 bosses of EMS for those smaller places. But that serves the population better, because you have a more responsive, that manager is now not responsive to the organization, the umbrella organization. It's responsible more to the customers that it serves. So I mean, the devil will be in the details. You know, it doesn't look like there's going to be dramatic changes in my neck of the woods. That was my first hope, and I started looking into it, and it's like, oh, AHS is still going to be in charge of my life as a paramedic, but they're going to be getting out of continuing care. They're going to be getting out of mental health. There's going to be some changes, and there's going to be some wailing and gnashing of teeth from the left, and the left is going to talk about the chaos that this will create. And no doubt there will be some growing pains. I mean, we're going to have to transition from one system to another. And you know, right now AHS controls a bunch of continuing care centers, and now you're going to have you know, different organizations take over those continuing care, and some will be bad and some will be really good and exceptional. And there's going to be a diversity of different models applied, right? And isn't that valuable? Isn't diversity our strength, Lisa? Don't we want to see that in like a marketplace of different things happening? So I think that'll be in general a good thing. I just wish it would also that there would be some diversity in acute care as well. But it looks like we're maintaining the homogeneity of acute care. Everyone's getting the same gruel, the same stale bread, and the same bread lines when it comes to acute care. But when it comes to these other things like mental health, continuing care, those things are likely going to see some improvements, and there's going to be some more opportunity. And so that's a good thing, I think. I don't know. What are do you have any thoughts about?
I'm just really curious to see how it goes. Like when you're talking about extended care and that type of thing, there's now in the news about Christians in Development and how they were doing life leases on some of their retirement homes, and what that looks like for those seniors, for that not being legal in Alberta, and them, those people being at the retirement stages of their life and out hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right. So I'm just wondering if this is going to make more opportunity for that to be happening to people at a right. time when we should be taking care of them. Yeah. Or not, because I've been in some retirement places that you wonder if anyone actually shows up to take care of people there, Yeah.
And often this is framed as a debate between, the UCP just wants to privatize everything, and we see how bad private is, right? Like I've worked private EMS and it sucks, and the equipment's bad and the pay's bad and the care is substandard a lot of times. Well, but the problem is it's not really private. It's not a free market entity. Okay. It's what we're talking about is a difference between fascism and socialism. And on one hand, we have, when the left likes to criticize or say that they're privatizing things, what they mean is they're still using government money, but they're contracting a private entity to take care of that for them. So it's not as if it's a private service in that it's attracting voluntary customers. No, they're given they're giving a monopoly to a private organization, and they're giving it to the organization that bids the lowest. And so the only way that private organization can make money is off the backs of patients or staff. Like it has to cut costs somewhere, because the government's given it a set amount of money. It's not like it can make more money by attracting more customers or charging a higher fee to customers that want a premium product or something like that you would expect in a free market where it creates abundance. No, we've now created the worst of both worlds, right? We have an entity that has a monopoly, that is profit driven, that is getting all its money from extortion by the government. So I don't, I'm not a big fan of the fascistic model of healthcare, as much as I'm not a fan of the socialist model of healthcare. I do prefer to work directly for, if we're going to have government funding these things, I prefer to work directly for the government than a private entity being funded by the government. It just seems to work better, in terms of an end product. But what I would prefer to see altogether is just legalizing healthcare and have the government get out of it, or do something like the Swedish model, at least, where they've legalized healthcare and they still have a robust public system that backstops it.
So based on what you're saying, how is that going to be any different from what Danielle's proposing to do right now then?
Well, I don't know. The devil will be in the details, right? So when it says AHS is no longer under, and it looks like, based on there's some leaked slides. I'm just looking at the org chart. They're adding a few things, and I can't really see it. Let's see if I can share this screen here. Let's see. There we go. So I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there we go. But it's not advancing to the slide I want. Oh, maybe that's the wrong one. Hold on. I need to add. Oh, there we go. So what we have right now, I think this is the current state, Minister of Health. So that's the Alberta government. And you have one organization, basically one entity that the Minister of Health controls, and that's Alberta Health Services. If we scroll down, this is the new one. Let's see if I can turn it around. We can see if I can zoom in here. It's really hard to see this, but yeah, so there we have Minister of Health, and then we have an integration council. So there's a council that integrates all the different components of healthcare. And under that, you have acute care organization, you have a continuing care organization, you have a primary care organization, medical health and addictions organization. And I think Alberta Health is in there. I don't know where Alberta Health is, but you can see there's a bunch more levels here. So you're going to have different organizations taking care of different things. Now, whether that will work better or not, I don't know. And whether that implies privatization, where they're going to now contract out a lot of these things, I don't know. I mean, AHS contracts out a lot of its services already. Like there's plenty of there's a few ambulance services around, like Prairie and Medavie, that are private services that are contracted to Alberta Health. And so they're not private in the libertarian sense. They're private in the fascistic sense, in that this is the corporation that's approved by the state and paid by the state to deliver a monopoly of services in this area. And your boy here, Tim, can't start a competing service with them, can't charge customers, can't provide any market forces. But that's where we're at. So we'll see. But breaking news, and we'll see if this is truly decentralization, whether it changes culture in any way. One of the things we had before in Alberta was we had different health regions, right? And they had some autonomy. And so as a healthcare worker, you at least had the ability to go from one health region to another. If you didn't like your employer in one region, you could go to an employer in another region with a different environment, different leadership philosophy, different set of priorities, and different management style. And there was some competition interprovincially to have a better healthcare a better region than the other one to attract healthcare workers to. Well, right now there's none of that, right? AHS is just shitty right across the board, and no matter where you go as a healthcare worker, you're under the thumb of the same shitty management style and treated as shit. So
has Notley responded?
Oh yeah, Notley. Well, she's apparently going to have a comprehensive response, I think, on Tuesday or something like that. But these slides that I was showing you were leaked yesterday, and she basically said the same thing Clemanga said: is, well, this looks like it's going to increase red tape, and it looks like it's going to give the provincial government more control over healthcare than it already has, which is a bad thing. What we want is the healthcare experts, the bureaucrats, the scientists at the top of these organizations to manage healthcare. Well, yeah, I don't want the premier managing healthcare or the politicians, but I sure as shit don't want those scientists managing healthcare either, or those so-called experts that managed us through the pandemic. I mean, that was absolutely terrible. At least Danielle Smith has a philosophy that says government ought to be restrained, and that it's probably immoral to impose our will on people. Whereas health experts have no such calculation. They have no ethical, moral compunction about using force and destroying people's lives. They are simply looking at one thing and one thing alone. That is, how do I decrease viral load? Well, science says if we kill everyone, that'll decrease viral spread, right? And I mean, that's essential. That's basically their logic taken to extremists. But yeah, we can shut down the economy. You know, do you want anyone to die? No. Well, then you better put a mask over your face. You better take this jab, and you better not leave your home, and you better stay in your hermetically sealed matrix pod, getting propaganda shoved into your neocortex by state-approved media, and not, you know, and just be happy there. Otherwise, people will die. Well, yes, that may be true, but maybe we want to do more than just avoid a virus in life, right? Maybe we actually want to live. And so at least Daniel Smith understands that life isn't just about avoiding a virus. It's about living. And so I'd prefer, I guess, if she managed these decisions rather than the healthcare experts. But I do worry, obviously, about putting more power in the hands of the premier, if that is in fact what's happening here. So I guess time will tell. We'll have to see the details. But no doubt, folks, you're going to hear horror stories coming out from the media, from the, you know, UCP enemies, and they're going to be all over the news, and you're going to see it everywhere.
Well, maybe. Well, you won't actually see it everywhere, Tim, because you can't share news stories on social media in Canada, right? Thanks,
right.
Trudeau.
If you watch the TV, if you watch the news, if you read a newspaper, you're going to see bad news everywhere about what Daniel Smith is doing to our healthcare system.
But I'm a little sad that I'm going to miss out on like the forum, like the streams of commentary and fear mongering from the left.
Well, go to Twitter. You'll find it there.
True. I kind of stay off Twitter, but
yeah, you'll find it there. All right, let's move on. I thought there was an interesting moment in Parliament that I wanted to just talk about here. I'm going to play this, get your impression. Let's see here. Share screen.
This always makes me nervous, by the way. I'm always like, what are we going to do now, Tim?
Oh, this is okay. You might have seen this.
We're talking, Mr. Speaker. So I was sitting. I'm a liberal and a proud socialist, Mr. Speaker.
Let's listen.
We're talking, Mr. Speaker. So I was sitting. I'm a liberal and a proud socialist, Mr. Speaker.
There we have Stephen Guilbeault, the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, saying he's a liberal and a proud socialist. Yeah. Thoughts?
Who dressed him when he went to work that day?
Yeah. It looks like, I think it's one of the maybe it's a hemp suit. You know, it looks like it was recycled from something.
Well, or I was thinking thrift store anyway, so it's recycled for sure. I find that interesting. Like, he really needed to make that statement publicly. Hey, just let's interrupt everything and say that.
Well, yeah, it's. I mean, I'm just taking a better look at this suit here. Yeah, very brown, very lifeless. Just it's like dirt. You know, it reminds me of. I went to this joint. Back when I was running in 2015, I was in the Maritimes, and I was opposed to this bill C-51. It was invasion of privacy thing that Harper was trying to bring in. And Elizabeth May was on my side. And so was this liberal candidate who got booted from the Liberal Party for opposing Bill C-51. Anyways, the Green Party was having this rally, and I was there to speak with Elizabeth May and stuff like that, just to show solidarity on this one issue. And I saw a lot of browns, and I can almost smell it. It smelled like soil and just compost. It was like it was kind of a pungent compost odor in that whole room, in that Green Party room. That's what I imagine he smells like there. He smells like compost.
Riding to the Muskeg in springtime.
Yeah. Anyways, so he says out loud, the quiet part out loud, and basically says, I'm a socialist, which kudos on his honesty. But I mean, the fact that he could say that without any fear of that being a bad or reflecting negatively on him in any way among his constituents, I found interesting. Like, you would never see a Conservative Party member stand up and say, I'm a proud libertarian, right?
No.
Even though, according to Ronald Reagan, the heart of conservatism is libertarianism. Ever since Reagan, no conservative has ever admitted to being a libertarian. There was even one conservative member of parliament in Edmonton who was wearing a t-shirt that said taxation is theft on an airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He's probably a libertarian. And he got outed for having this, and he disavowed, I was just wearing it as a joke and as a conversation starter and blah, blah, blah. No, dude, you're probably a libertarian. You probably actually believe taxation is theft, but you just don't want to lose your job. And, so this is one of the reasons why I believe conservatives are just progressives or socialists driving the speed limit, because they continually capitulate to the left. Like, these guys never disavow their radicals, right? The more radical, the radical Marxists and stuff like that, they're brought in as speakers. They're embraced. They're never disavowed by the liberals, by the left. They're, they may not sit in seats of power, but certainly the intellectuals and the ideologues that are, they're part of the pack. While conservatives continually disavow libertarians. I mean, Harper famously disavowed libertarians at a Manning conference, basically did everything he could to kick them out of the Conservative Party after they helped him get leadership and all that, but as soon as they're done with you, they disavow it, because libertarianism is seen as it's just bad mojo. You can't be associated with that. And this is why they continually capitulate. Like, they continually have to take the establishment centrist view, and people on the left, like your Stephen Guilbeault or whatever his name is, he'll continually pull the center further and further left, and the conservatives have to shift further and further left with them, because no one will stand up in Parliament and say, Mr. Speaker, I'm a proud libertarian and taxation is theft, and we ought to end it, because they'd be worried that they'd get excoriated by the press, that'd be bad for them, right? And so, because they lack this courage, and because I guess they have some semblance of shame that the left doesn't have, the left will shamelessly plug the most violent, crazy ideologies, and so they continue to win. What do you think?
Well, okay, so this, just from a normie.
Yes.
Okay. Please. Having conversations, because I've had conversations about being a libertarian and that type of thing with people, and conservatives, like normie conservatives, are like, you're a liberal? And I'm like, no, libertarian, right. Totally different. But because the words contain some of the same letters,
right. Yes, yeah,
it automatically is like, oh, like the devil just stepped into the room here. And I don't know how you overcome that. So I think that could be part of the reason, just to dumb it right down, why conservatives might be afraid to say they're a libertarian, because then normies would hear it as, you're a liberal. And
that's true.
Of course it cause problems.
Well, and does that, I don't want to be mean, but how do I put this? Maybe I'm just a
Use
pretentious.
Small words, Tim.
Maybe I'm a pretentious prick here, but who was right in the pandemic? Who was on the right side of that thing? It was not the midwits. Okay. The midwits were on the wrong side. By midwits, I mean the average intelligence people who think that science and blah, 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 who praise the establishment, who just drink everything the establishment says. Those guys were in favor of everything establishment, just average IQ. But people that were on the right side of that were either, my perspective, high IQ people and low IQ people, dimwits and intelligent people. Okay. So this is where me being pretentious comes in. Okay. I feel like I was against the pandemic for intelligent reasons, right? You don't violate people's autonomy. You don't, you can't universalize these rules. Like obviously if the virus or the vaccine is either effective, in which case my vaccine status doesn't matter, or it's ineffective, in which case your vaccine status doesn't matter. Right. So I'm looking at things from first principles from, but also on my side are dimwits who say we can't take the vaccine because it's 5G and they're going to control us and blah, blah, blah. Right.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, there's all sorts of people, and this is a depopulation method, even though that makes absolutely no sense. Why would the elite want to leave only the most disagreeable people on the planet alive and kill all the people that are walking in lockstep with the establishment and kill those people? They want the most rabble-rousing, the rootin' tootin'. Anyways, so, but those were my people. Okay. I was on the side with the dimwits. They were on my side. They didn't want to kill me. They didn't want to control me. So those are my people. Right. And so, but those are the people when I go door to door also, and I tell them I'm a libertarian, I'm not a liberal. Fuck off. Right. Oh, God damn it. I'm trying to help you. Help me to help you. Okay. Help me to help you. And so maybe what you hit on is a function of that, right? Because midwits will buy into socialism all day because it sounds intellectual, and Marx has this whole manifesto, and they've done some reading, and dimwits will discount it out of hand just instinctually, like that's a bunch of hogwash and blah blah blah, and they're intuitively right. Right. And me on the other side will disavow socialism because there's a price problem, and you can't coordinate the means of production, and the definitions on this are wrong, and there's an epistemic fault here in your reasoning. Right. So I'm going through all this like highbrow reasons to dismiss it. Meanwhile, the dimwits are just dismissing it out of hand because I got a hog farm and blah, blah, blah. It's not going to work.
Well, cattle ranch, but whatever.
Yeah. Cattle ranchers are a little higher IQ, but anyways, I'm trying to remember where I was going with it. But yeah, so my point is that midwits tend to constitute these kind of leftist progressive, because look, all the late show people, your Bill Maher's, your Stephen Colbert's, they kind of have a bit of they have this midwit humor, right? You have to have a certain level of intelligence and a certain attitudinal disposition of openness to laugh at their stuff and find their stuff funny. A lot of people like just hard-nosed reality-based people who do blue-collar work for a living, let's say live in rural areas, don't have any time for those shows because they
don't stay up that late.
They don't stay up that late, and they don't really get the humor to begin with, right? But so that midwittery or that midwit kind of elitist mentality is what constitutes the Liberal Party. And so they'll be like, yes, Stephen Colbert, he's a socialist. Very good, very good. I'm very sympathetic towards socialism. Whereas if a conservative, like you said, stood up and said that, their constituents would disavow them because they're liberals, right? And maybe that's just a function of IQ. I don't know. Maybe you're onto something, Lisa.
I just know that I've had conversations or tried to engage in conversations with what's going on. And as soon as, well, which way do you vote? Well, libertarian. Then it's like, you're a liberal and we can't, why would we even talk to you anymore about this? And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you realize there's a very big difference. But how do you explain that to normies?
It's tough. It's tough. And that's part of the problem we face, right? It's like, part of the temptation is to simplify everything down for this TikTok generation that can't focus on more than 6-second sound bites and bumper stickers and memes. And so you want to dumb everything down, but at the same time, you realize that that's part of the problem, is that everyone is dumbing everything down to the lowest common denominator into these two binary choices of left and right that are both fucking idiotic. And you can't have a thoughtful, principled, nuanced view on things, because if you do, you'll be no one will listen to you, no one will agree with you. So that is a real issue. But
and your slogans aren't catchy, and then you're just hated on all sides. If we wanted to talk about many of the ways that the left hates the right and the right hates the left, and anybody who tries to ask a question gets shouted down for being hateful.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I mean, that's largely driven too by social media algorithms, which, kind of foment outrage and anger. And, like if you want to write an article or do a video, I mean, if I want this video to get lots of views, I need to write something clickbaity. And oftentimes people won't go past the clickbait headlines, like, Tim Moen destroys socialism or something like that. Oh yeah,
I was thinking you could call it "Proud to be a Liberal" and you'd get a lot of clicks.
Yeah, proud to be a liberal. Yeah. Well, I was actually going to name it "Proud to be a Libertarian," but we'll see. That's not going to get very many clicks. So what are you going to do? Okay, so there we go. Stephen, and now, by the way, Stephen Guilbeault, our Minister of Environment and Climate, he's heading to Dubai or Abu Dhabi, I think it's Dubai, for climate summit. And his job, he is tasked with the difficult job of getting all the other countries to drop their CO2 emissions on target with the 2030 emissions standard that'll keep us below a 1.5 degrees centigrade of warming or something like that. Canada right now is like, I listened to the news this morning. It said we're like still over double the target of the Paris Accord or whatever. That's going to keep us under 1.5. The problem is, of course, that Canada is only like 1% of world emissions, or maybe even less. So even if we meet those emission standards, we're still going to hit the warming that they're predicting, right? So now Stephen, in his compost smelling brown suit, is going to have to go over to Dubai and convince the rest of the world, the developing countries like India and China, hey guys, stop using so much energy. Could you just decrease your standard of living back to squalor and poverty? That would be really good. And this guy, and guys, let me just show you a picture of this guy again, because I mean, where is he now? Where's Steve? Oh yeah, there we go. Yeah, this guy. This is the guy that's going to convince the rest of the world to drop climate emissions.
I'm confident.
Are you? What's he going to say? Smell that compost. It smells natural. It smells natural.
Right. Let me put on my patchouli essential oils.
Yeah, but you can smell like me. You can look like me.
Tim, where'd you go?
Oh, I don't know what I did.
That's it.
Never
You were
tried.
just, I thought you were going to come back dressed like our buddy Steve.
Yeah. All right. Let's move on from Steve. I don't think Steve's going to have much success convincing the rest of the world to live in squalor and poverty. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk about, actually, oh shit. Hold on. I'm going to pause the record.
I still think you should have came back dressed like Steve.
I should have. Okay. I had to pause because I had to find this clip that I wanted to talk about. And this is Tucker Carlson, a segment from Tucker Carlson's show where apparently someone who worked in the medical examiner's office when where George Floyd was autopsy is going through a court case or suing the ME's office for some reason or another. And Tucker Carlson had this to say about some of the information that's coming out of that. So let me just put this on. Get your thoughts here.
Significantly, they also sent a cop called Derek Chauvin to prison for more than 40 years. He would be the racist white devil who murdered George Floyd. But the question is, did he actually murder George Floyd? And the answer is, well, no, he didn't murder George Floyd. And we're not guessing about that. We know it conclusively, thanks to a new court case now underway in Hennepin County, Minnesota. The case was brought by a prosecutor there called Amy Sweezy. She's suing her boss. So the case is not actually about George Floyd or Derek Chauvin, but it tells you an awful lot about both of them. In her deposition, which you should read, Amy Sweezy describes a conversation that she had with the county medical examiner, Andrew Baker, right after George Floyd died. Quote, I called Dr. Baker early that morning to tell him about the case and to ask him if he would perform the autopsy on Mr. Floyd. Sweezy recalls all this under oath in the deposition. Quote, he called me later in the day on that Tuesday, and he told me that there were no medical findings that showed any injury to the vital structures of Mr. Floyd's neck. There were no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation. Oh. In other words, George Floyd, according to the official autopsy, was not murdered. He died instead of what we used to call natural causes, which in his case would include decades of drug use, as well as the fatal concentration of fentanyl that was in his system on his final day. So this was not a killing. It was yet another narcotics OD in a country that records more than 100,000 of them every year. The medical examiner clearly understood that and in fact articulated it. And Sweezy explains. He said to me, she recalls in the deposition, Amy, what happens when the actual evidence doesn't match up with the public narrative that everyone's already decided on? And then he said, quote, this is the kind of case that ends careers. In other words, everyone lied about it from the very beginning. The people who knew the truth hid the truth and allowed the revolution to proceed. Now they've been exposed.
All right. What are your thoughts when you see that?
Well, that's very interesting. But so I'm one of those people, I'm like, I have to be watching it and I'd have to watch it again to be really clear on what it is. So the medical examiner said that there was no sign of asphyxiation or anything like that. Where does the fentanyl overdose come in? Like, where is that in the findings? Or is there no actual anything?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll that's okay. I'll tell you my take on this. This is being trotted out as kind of a slam dunk that Chauvin, this officer, didn't cause George Floyd's death. Okay. I don't see it that way. I still think that Chauvin caused his death, or at least contributed to it. Put it this way. Had Chauvin not done what he did, I don't believe George Floyd would have died. All right. Now let's examine what the ME is purported to say here. Okay. If there were no medical findings that showed any injury to the vital structures of Mr. Floyd's neck, there were no medical indications of asphyxia or strangulation. Okay. So he didn't see any trauma to the neck. He didn't see any let's say, petechia around the eyes, which would
Mhm.
be indication of strangulation. I've read the autopsy front to back, and a lot of people will claim that he died of a fentanyl overdose, because in the autopsy you will find that he had fentanyl in his system. He had a fairly high level of fentanyl in his system. The autopsy also showed that he had cardiac disease. He had like occlusion to multiple narrowing and occlusions to multiple coronary arteries. So his heart was not healthy. And so he had those two things working against him. There. Now, I don't buy that he died of a fentanyl overdose, and I'll tell you why. I deal with fentanyl overdoses on a daily basis. I know how they happen. I see how they happen.
In Sherwood Park, right? Not when your ambulance is sent to Edmonton, right?
Yeah. In Sherwood Park, in the bougie Sherwood Park. No, it's definitely downtown Edmonton where I see these. In fact, I had a kid the other day OD on fentanyl, and this is how it happens. You take the fentanyl, and within seconds to minutes, and in fact, I've seen this happen right in front of me. I've seen someone, I've literally resuscitating someone with Narcan, who's unconscious, trying to get them to breathe again. And I saw someone about to shoot up, and I'm like, "Hey, that's a strong batch. We're going to be doing the same thing to you in a second." And she was like, "I don't care." And she pushed it, and in under a minute, she was unconscious and not breathing. Okay, that's how fast it happens. It happens within seconds and minutes. That fentanyl hits you, it knocks you unconscious, and the way you die of a narcotics or an opiate overdose is not that the substance is toxic and it poisons you. It's that it makes you unconscious, and then shortly after you stop breathing, it's basically like your brain forgets to breathe. It's so sedated that it doesn't breathe. And so that's how it goes. So it's within minutes. Now, I don't believe, like, if you look at the timeline of what happened with George Floyd, the cops were called because he was acting intoxicated. In other words, he was high at a convenience store trying to pass off, I think, a counterfeit bill or something like that. And 30 minutes later, Chauvin is kneeling on his back and Floyd dies. So that he had taken the fentanyl, obviously, before the police were called, and then he stopped breathing 30 minutes later. That doesn't happen in a fentanyl overdose. Okay. You don't die 30 minutes later. If you're going to die of the fentanyl overdose, you die within minutes. You stop breathing within minutes, or you don't stop breathing at all and you continue on. Right. So I don't buy that it was a fentanyl overdose. Now, the fentanyl probably made him weaker, for sure. It made him have less respiratory drive than he otherwise would have. Like a normal healthy male that didn't have coronary artery disease, that didn't have fentanyl in his system, wouldn't have died had Chauvin kneeled on him. But Floyd did, because he had fentanyl and because he had a weak heart. So it was a combination of the weak heart, the fentanyl, and the fact that his breathing was restricted. He had an officer laying fully on his back, restricting his ability to inhale. And that's what caused him to stop breathing and to go unconscious. So nothing that that's been revealed by this prosecutor in this thing would cause me to think otherwise. Now, there are these reported statements by the ME, right, that there's no medical findings to show any injury. So how then would an ME come up with a cause of death based on the fact that, okay, I can't see anything in the autopsy that I can pinpoint on it as a cause of death? His coronary artery disease could have been a cause of death. The fentanyl could have been a cause of death, but it's very unlikely, because he would have had to have taken the fentanyl, within minutes of stopping breathing. And we know that he took the fentanyl
with the officer on his back.
Right. So now you're left as a medical professional who understands how fentanyl overdoses work, who understands how heart attacks work, myocardial infarctions work, and you're looking at that going, okay, there's no sign of, like, if it was a myocardial infarction, you likely would have seen a dead area of the heart, ischemia or infarct, right? But he didn't see that on autopsy. All he saw was this coronary artery disease, which meant that his heart was weak. It's more likely not going to take a strain as a healthy heart, right? So it wasn't a myocardial infarction or a heart attack. And it wasn't a fentanyl overdose. What else could it be, given that there's no signs of like strangulation, right? He wasn't actively strangled and struggling to breathe past the strangulation, which would cause petechial hemorrhage in the eyes. What would you call it? Well, this medical examiner on the front page called it homicide by neck compression. He thinks it was a compressed neck, maybe the positioning of the airway. I might disagree. I don't know if it was the compressed neck so much as a compressed thorax that in his weakened state caused it. But at any rate, that's what you would put on the autopsy, because it's the only thing that makes any sense given the evidence. There's no, if he had died within minutes if he stopped breathing within minutes of taking the fentanyl, then we could say, okay, it was the fentanyl. But it wasn't that. And by the way, just because your breathing stops, like it takes time, right? You go unconscious, you stop breathing, and then maybe minutes later you go into cardiac arrest. You don't go into immediate cardiac arrest, right? You don't go unconscious, stop breathing, and go into immediate cardiac arrest with fentanyl. So that's another reason. So let's say what else he said. He said to me, Amy, what happens when the actual evidence doesn't match up with the public narrative that everyone's already decided on? Well, yeah, I imagine what this Emmy was hoping for was an obvious cause of death, right? And it would have been an open and shut case had he found like a ligature mark around his neck or petechial hemorrhage or something that showed this guy was obviously strangled and asphyxiated by Chauvin, but he didn't see that. So now he's left with trying to figure out, well, what's the most likely explanation for how this guy died? And it was, well, a knee on the back, knee on the neck, right? That was the most likely explanation. And, now should Chauvin have gotten, I think he got charged with second-degree murder or something like that, and he's serving a huge sentence. I think that was definitely political overkill. It was a politically driven motive, politically driven charge. I could see manslaughter or something like that. There's this maxim in common law, self-defense maxim, that it's called the what is it called? The eggshell skull defense or something like that, right? So it's basically the person's fragile state does not negate a manslaughter or something like that. So if you're defending yourself or you're using force and you kill someone because they're fragile, because they're unusually fragile, that's not a defense against manslaughter. That's not a defense against killing. So I think Chauvin was probably guilty of manslaughter. He probably, when George Floyd stopped struggling when he was, but then again, maybe not. Maybe he used reasonable force there. I don't know. He definitely shouldn't be serving time, I don't believe, for second-degree murder, but he definitely did cause the death of George Floyd. Maybe he's guilty of manslaughter and should serve a bit of time, but yeah, not second-degree murder. But also Floyd didn't die of a drug overdose or a heart attack, or in my opinion, based on my experience. And I think the medical examiner agree with me. And I don't see anything in these revelations from Tucker that would make me think otherwise. Those are just things that someone's going to say. I mean, you would be worried about what it would look like to the public when you're like not finding any open and shut case. So I could see why he would say that. And this lady that is reporting is a filthy prosecutor. I mean, these are lawyers who are going to take things out of context and try to win their case, right? So I don't buy the prosecutor's story so much. But anyways, any more thoughts on that one?
No, but thank you for explaining it in such great detail, Tim.
Well, my pleasure. My pleasure. I'm happy to explain things all day long. Hey, guys out there listening, if you want me to explain things to you, just ask. I can explain anything to you. And it all comes back to the government and how the government sucks. Okay? I can link anything to the government.
And taxation theft.
And taxation theft. All right. The last thing I wanted to cover with you is, let's see. How do I get this up here? I don't know if you saw this, but Steven Crowder managed to get, remember that Nashville shooter?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there was, she was a transgender female. No, transgender male. It was a biological female, transgender male. Yeah. Shot up this Christian school, killed a bunch of kids, and had a manifesto that we haven't seen yet. Well, Steven Crowder got a hold of this somehow. He had a source. And we're all wondering, well, why aren't they sharing the manifesto? What are they holding back? I mean, if this had been a right-wing shooter, we always see the manifesto that outlines their loony right-wing ideas and incel ideas about why they should shoot up the school. So why aren't we seeing this one? And everyone theorized, well, it was because it's a left-wing manifesto and no one wants to, you know, and they by the way, they counted the shooter as one of the victims in the media, right? So this shooter was being portrayed as a victim in the media, and their manifesto was being kept. So you could see the media bias here, right? So let's see what this thing actually says. All right, let's see if I don't know if I can zoom in here. Today's the day. The day's finally come. I can't believe it's here. Don't know how I was able to get this far, but here I am. I'm a little nervous, but excited too. Been excited for the past 2 weeks. There were several times I could have been caught, especially back in the summer of 2021. None of that matters now. I'm at most an hour and 7 minutes away. Can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm ready. I hope my victims aren't. My only fear is that anything goes wrong. I hope to have it's going to be quick. I hope to have a high death count, ready to die. Haha. Kill those kids, those crackers, going to private fancy schools with those fancy khakis and sports backpacks, with their daddies' Mustangs and convertibles. Fuck you, little shits. I wish to shoot you. Blah, blah, blah. Dicks in your mop yellow hair. Want to kill all you crackers. Bunch of little faggots with your white privilege. Fuck you, faggots. And it goes on and on like that. He's got his whole agenda laid out there. But very clearly, again, anyone who shoots up a school is mentally unhinged, whether they have a right-wing manifesto or a left-wing manifesto. I just think it's interesting that they kept this out of the media. I mean, here we have someone who feels aggrieved by white privilege, who feels hates kids that are more well off than they are, and of course that's part of the DNA of the left, right? You can't criticize that stuff because I mean that stuff. So we have to hide that away because we don't want that those kind of grievances associated with this kind of violence. What are your thoughts when you hear and see what's in the manifesto there?
Well, now I'm like, boy, I want to read more articles about all of this stuff. See, so what happens because you put me on. I'm on the surprise for all of this,
right?
But you'd think it would be celebrated more by certain.
You'd think the left would celebrate this?
Well, why not?
That's
They think
fair.
of it
Maybe they would.
themselves, maybe not to that extreme or whatever, but
Yeah, I mean, you certainly see. It seems like the left, for example, there's a certain element in the left that celebrates the Hamas attacks, right? Who are happy that babies and Jewish babies and women and children and old people were killed, and see that as a plus. You'd think people like that would be happy when these privileged cis white Christian kids were killed, but maybe they recognize that would be socially popular.
they went a little too far there if they were to celebrate that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what's the world coming to? I mean, one of the things that it makes me think of too is just how much loneliness and isolation there is, right? I mean, obviously, this shooter was mentally unbalanced, had a lot of hate and resentment in them. They were alone. They felt different. They felt cut off, and
that they didn't belong somewhere else,
right?
Because if they were fully embraced in community elsewhere, then the focus wouldn't necessarily be on other community either, right?
Well,
absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, it was. You're right. It was not an internal focus. It was an external focus, right? And a lot of people who are in this circumstance, if they have proper environment around them, proper mentors, they'll say, "Yeah, you're miserable. You have no competence. You're like you can't provide any value to anyone." But guess what? I was once there too, and you can get out of that. You can make yourself useful. You can start by, here's what I did to become more useful and to feel good about myself and to have more connection and blah, blah, blah. Well, these people clearly don't have that around them. Instead, what they have around them is a victim mentality industrial complex, let's say, right? They have people that benefit from a world that embraces a victim mentality that says, no, you're not the problem.
Those guys are the problem.
It's the whole rest of the world needs to change, obviously, or your life is always going to be shit. You're never, and we see this everywhere. We see it. I mean, it's easy to point the stuff out on the left, right? We see it when in the race baiters, right? The people who say, look, the reason you as an Indigenous person can't succeed is because of structural racism, because of this, because of that, because of, all those things are bad things. And they all have to change before you're ever going to be successful is the message, right? And so help us change this. Well, you're just told a person, you've done the opposite of help someone. You've basically locked them into a pattern of helplessness and hopelessness, right? There's no hope because I can see the system isn't changing. I can see none of these, the environment around me isn't getting any better. And so what are you left to do when you're full of resentment, isolation, and hopelessness, but go out in a blaze of glory and nihilism and shoot up a bunch of things, right? Then we see the same pattern on the right. Right when people don't like to talk about it or point it out, but look, these people who are incels, right? Involuntarily celibate. Have you heard of this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For example, the guy in Toronto who mowed down a bunch of people with his van, right? He identified as an incel, or these people who shoot up mosques, for example, right? The common denominator they have with this left-wing lunatic is that they see themselves as victims. They see no way that they can improve their lot in life. Everything is the fault of external forces, things that they can't control. And so they delve into nihilism, into cynicism, into hopelessness and isolation. And they surround themselves with people that encourage their victim mentality, right? And I often wonder about this myself, like as a libertarian who's constantly criticizing the external environment, criticizing the government, what what message am I sending there? Is there a message of hope? Is there a message of like steps you can take forward to improve your life, get more liberty, get more freedom, despite what the government's doing? And I think about that quite a bit, because actually early in my political career, I had something horrific happen that made me really think about the words I was saying. Do you remember what is it, Monkville, Nova Scotia? There was a guy who shot, like, I think shot and killed 3 police officers. I'm trying to remember. Is it Moncton, New Brunswick? Yeah, Moncton, New Brunswick. This was back in, I think, 2014 or something like that. I was running in a by-election. I had all these memes out there. I had this one meme that said, I saw a movie once where only the cops and military had firearms. It was called Schindler's List. And this killer had my meme with my face on it on his Facebook profile. And so immediately the media was pointing to me. Is libertarianism promoting terrorism in this country? Is it, and holy fuck, that was a holy fuck moment for me. After I got over the initial panic of having everyone point to me as the cause of this, these cop killings, I took a sober second look and thought, is there a way in which I am contributing to the energy feeding this hopelessness that this guy must have been feeling, or contributing to the idea that what needs to change is this all needs to go away before I can have liberty and freedom, right? And that stuck with me. And I often find myself thinking about that because there's so many grifters out there that put out a constantly negative message. If they're not, they have to constantly be fighting the system, constantly fighting whatever, they're freedom fighting patriots, right? And I appreciate them on one extent, but I also worry about that there is a lot of grift that goes on in that community as well. If you want to increase your following and increase your channel, you have to have a list of grievances and continually explain to people why they're victims of a horrible system and how they need to get involved in your cause and maybe give you a little bit of money to fix this huge problem. Yeah. Well, when your means of getting money and getting prestige in a particular environment are all about painting your followers as victims and who are helpless against this tyrannical force out there, I worry, Lisa, am I contributing in some way? We see it on both sides, right? It's just that there's a victim industrial complex. Social media sets it up that way in a lot of ways. And it rewards the grifters that peddle victim mentality. And I might be one of those peddlers. That's what I worry about sometimes.
But do you feel that your message is always that way? Because we did a podcast 6 weeks ago or whatever, where it wasn't based on that. It was on personal responsibility and integrity and taking the steps to better yourself.
Yes. No, you're right. You're right. But that's a conscious effort. And I have to fight every day the cynicism I have towards the external world and dragging people down with me into that cynicism. And so, you know what? We'll leave it there because this is going to segue nicely into the next show I want to have with you, Lisa, which is to talk about this book I'm reading and some of the ideas that's percolating in me. It's called The Network State, and it's all about creating stateless nations through networks. And that's actually something positive you can build towards. And essentially it makes, it's focusing so much on something positive that it makes the current state irrelevant to your life. And it might just wither and die because of the focus on something positive. So I want to talk more about this on the next episode, guys. Make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you follow me on all the social medias. You can see a bunch of my links below. Follow my Substack and you'll get newsletters and different things like that and updates about what's going on. But you're going to want to tune into the next episode because my brain's been on fire about this subject. And I can't believe I didn't talk about it today, actually. I want to read a bit more about it before I talk to you next. You know what? I delved into all the darkest shit today, Nisa. You know, again, just like I did the very thing that I'm now, you know, don't shoot up any schools, please, listeners. Don't become a nihilist. Don't let me send you off a hopeless spire of cynicism and nihilism. There's hope at the end of the tunnel, but you got to stay tuned because it's coming next week. So stay tuned for the hope.